Picture a Roman general after a long day. He has no soap, no shower, no shampoo. And yet, by the standards of his world, he is about to get genuinely, thoroughly clean. How? That is the puzzle. For most of human history, the things we treat as the bare minimum of hygiene simply did not exist. So, did ancient people just walk around filthy? The honest answer surprises most people. Many of them were cleaner than you'd guess. They just got there by a completely different route than we do. Let's start with the obvious problem. Soap as we know it, a bar that lathers and rinses grime away, is a fairly late invention in the grand story of humans. True soap is made by combining fats with an alkali, usually ash from burned wood, mixed with animal tallow or oil. The Babylonians knew a version of this recipe around 4,000 years ago. But here's the twist. For a long stretch, soap wasn't mainly used for washing bodies. It was used for cleaning textiles, treating wool, or as a medicine for skin conditions. Bathing was a separate craft. So if you weren't scrubbing with soap, how did you get the dirt off? The answer the ancient world landed on, again and again, was oil. This sounds backwards. We think of oil as the thing that makes us greasy. But oil is actually a brilliant cleaner, and the Greeks and Romans built an entire ritual around it. Here's the trick. Dirt, dead skin, sweat, and the grime of the day stick to the body in a film. Plain water alone struggles to lift that film, but oil dissolves it. A Greek athlete would coat his whole body in olive oil before exercise. As he trained, the oil mixed with sweat, dust, and dead skin into a kind of paste. Then came the clever part. He'd take a curved metal tool called a strigil and scrape it across his skin, dragging off the oily layer, and with it, all the dirt trapped inside. Think of it like this. The oil grabs the grime, and the strigil hauls the whole mixture away in long strokes. What's left behind is skin that is clean, soft, and lightly conditioned. The gunk scraped off athletes even had a name and a market. It was collected and sold as a folk remedy, believed to soothe aches and skin troubles. One man's grime was another man's ointment. So the Romans took this idea and made it monumental. Their answer to bathing wasn't a quick rinse. It was an entire architecture of cleanliness, the public bathhouse. A proper Roman bath was a sequence. You'd move through warm rooms and hot rooms, working up a sweat in steamy air that opened your pores and loosened the dirt. Then the oil and the strigil did their work, scraping you down. After that came the cold plunge pool to close everything up and leave you tingling and refreshed. No soap in sight, yet the result was real. Heat to loosen, oil to capture, scraping to remove, water to rinse and cool. Step by step, the grime came off. And these baths were enormous. The biggest ones in Rome could hold thousands of people at once, with heated floors, pools, and a staff to keep everything running. But the bathhouse was never only about being clean. It was where you met friends, made deals, gossiped, and lounged. Getting clean was woven into daily social life. Now, let's leave Rome, because every culture cracked this same problem in its own way, often without any oil at all. Across the ancient world, people reached for what we might call nature's soap, plants that produce a foamy substance when crushed in water. These plants contain compounds called saponins. The name literally points to soap. When you agitate them in water, they create a gentle lather that lifts away oils and dirt. Soapwort, a flowering plant, was used for washing both bodies and delicate fabrics for centuries. Crush the root, swish it in water, and you get a mild cleansing foam. In the Americas, the yucca and the soapberry tree did the same job. Indigenous peoples knew exactly which roots and berries would froth up and clean skin and hair. In parts of Asia, the fruit pods of the soapnut tree were the household cleaner of choice. Soak them, squeeze them, and out comes a natural detergent gentle enough for skin. So, the idea of lathering up to wash was not invented in a modern factory. People found foaming plants growing in the wild and put them straight to work. Then, there's the question of teeth, because a clean mouth mattered to ancient people just as much as clean skin, maybe more, given they had no dentists. The Egyptians made some of the earliest toothpaste we know of. The recipes are startling. They ground up ingredients like crushed eggshells, ash, and even powdered ox hooves. Mixed into a paste, this acted as a gentle abrasive, scrubbing away the film on teeth. Later versions added mint or other herbs to freshen the breath. The Romans, never subtle, took it further. One ingredient prized for whitening teeth was human urine, valued because it contains ammonia, a genuine cleaning agent. Yes, that's real. Imported urine from Portugal was apparently considered especially strong, and people paid for it. Disgusting to us, but the ammonia did brighten their smiles. Across many cultures, people also chewed on twigs from certain trees, fraying one end into bristles. These chew sticks scrubbed the teeth and released cleansing, antibacterial saps. This brings us to the heart of ancient cleaning, abrasives. Without foaming chemicals, you scrub. Sand, ash, pumice, ground shell, fine clay. These do the heavy lifting by sheer friction. Wood ash deserves special attention. Soaked in water, ash releases an alkaline solution called lye. Lye is harsh, but it cuts grease and lifts stains, the very base of real soap. So even cultures that never made bar soap were using ash water to scour their cookware, their clothes, and sometimes their skin. The chemistry was there long before the recipe was named. Clay was another quiet hero. Certain fine clays bind to oil and dirt particles. Smear them on, let them dry, brush them off, and you carry the grime away with the powder. People still use clay this way today in face masks and shampoos. The ancient instinct was correct. Some clays really do pull oils and impurities out of skin and hair. Now, here's a part of the story that often gets forgotten, and it's the most human part of all. Cleaning was never just chemistry. It was social. Watch a troop of monkeys, and you'll see them spend hours picking through each other's fur. We call it social grooming, and it serves two purposes at once. On the practical side, grooming removes dirt, dead skin, parasites, and tangles, things one individual can't easily reach or see on their own body. But on the emotional side, grooming builds bonds. It says, I trust you to touch me, and I'll spend my time caring for you. It cements friendships and calms tension in the group. Early humans almost certainly did the same. Combing fingers through a companion's hair, removing lice and debris, was both a cleaning act and a gesture of connection. You can still feel the echo of this. Think of a parent brushing a child's hair, or friends fussing over each other's appearance. Grooming bonds us as much as it cleans us. The Roman bathhouse in this light makes perfect sense. It wasn't just plumbing. It was social grooming scaled up into architecture, a place to be cleaned together. So let's step back and answer the title's question directly. Did ancient humans ever actually get clean? Yes. Genuinely, meaningfully clean, by the standards of any era. They didn't have our chemistry, but they understood the underlying physics. Loosen the grime with heat. Capture it with oil or foam. Scrape or scrub it off. Rinse with whatever water they had. A Roman emerging from a bathhouse, scraped down with oil and plunged in cold water, was not walking around coated in filth. He was clean, conditioned, and smelling of perfumed oils. An Egyptian who'd scrubbed her teeth with herbed paste and washed with foaming plant root was clean by any reasonable measure. So was a hunter who'd scoured up with ash and clay. Now, a fair caveat. Cleanliness was uneven. The poor had less time, less access to baths, and worse water. Disease still spread easily because germs were invisible and unknown. People didn't understand bacteria, so they couldn't connect dirty water to sickness the way we do. A bathhouse pool, shared by thousands, could spread infection as well as wash it away. So ancient hygiene was real, but it was about feeling and looking and smelling clean, not about killing the microbes we now know cause disease. That last piece had to wait. But the core human urge to clean ourselves and each other? That is ancient, clever, and deeply social. We've been scraping, lathering, and grooming for thousands of years. So next time you reach for a bottle of soap, remember the strigil, the soapwort root, the ash water, and the gentle hands that groomed our ancestors clean. We didn't invent the desire to be clean. We just found new tools. The instinct and the surprisingly smart solutions were with us all along.